All right, welcome everybody. We're so excited that y'all are down here in the library in our new podcast studio for this morning. Thank y'all for coming, and I'm excited to talk to all three of you because I don't think I've done that yet. And so you guys make up our guidance counseling staff in our department, and we just thought this was a great opportunity to get with the three of you to kind of just go through some things that we're thinking about as parents and as teachers of our students wanted to talk about some things. So thank y'all for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
We're excited. Okay, so we kind of got three areas that we're going to focus on. But one I wanted to just start with, not in any particular order, but we're going to go in this order, boundaries. All right. So that's a big buzzword, but I think a lot of people need some explanation as to what that is and why that's important for children. So talk to us a little bit about how you even explain to your children what a boundary might be and why it's important for them to have it, and if that plays out in relationships or school life, how it looks.
Well, I'll start
Okay.
just because that's something that we talk about a lot in the classroom with children, because they love to be in each other's personal space. They love to touch each other, and they love to sit on each other and play with each other's hair. And if you look in a lot of the lower school classrooms, they have kind of designated spots on a rug where kids can sit.
Right.
And it just starts talking about what your personal space is and what that looks like. And, one way might be that you could have a child stand in the middle of a hula hoop and just kind of say that, if something comes in that might be personal space. What's comfortable to you?
Right.
And being able to then use that language of, so-and-so's touching me. Well, rather than telling the teacher, which is fine, but giving the child the language to say, like, you're in my space. Like, could you please stop? Could you please scoot over? And then that way it's equipping them just to know how to kind of advocate for the space that they need.
Right.
And that space can look different for anybody. Just as some adults love to go in for a hug, other adults definitely don't want the hug.
Right.
And so it's kind of helping them learn how to read body language. And again, it's equipping them with language to use because it's language that will be used over and over and over again. And children are just their natural space invaders.
Right.
And, I know at teaching, they'll start touching my feet or they'll, kind of, get in on my personal space. And so it's sometimes reminding them too, like, can you please scoot back? Like, this is my personal space. So it's a good way too that adults can model that for kids for what that looks like.
That's great.
I think it's important too that boundaries talk continues on as they grow up through middle school and high school and even into adulthood. That there are a lot of different sort of facets to that. One thing that we have conversations with students about is culture, boundaries and culture. We can talk about the examples of there are different South American cultures where that personal bubble is really small, right? But if you start talking about like Scandinavian cultures, that bubble is like 12 feet, and if you were to sit really close to somebody, that would be an uncomfortable situation, whereas that wouldn't be somewhere else. And so it's a good reminder to us to understand that our students are learning boundaries, from a young age, but they're also learning that within sort of the microcosm of their family and their culture and their community. And so it's definitely something that we can think about in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, I think that's great.
And maybe like self-awareness of understanding, like, okay, where am I in this social situation?
Right.
Am I invading in somebody else's bubble?
Right.
Or how am I feeling if somebody's invading my bubble? And being aware of those feelings that are coming up within the child, and then having them think about those feelings and realize, oh, I'm in somebody else's space.
Right.
I need to make sure that I back off.
Right.
And so, like, self-awareness.
That's so important.
Big time in boundaries.
Right. That's so important. And that's a hard thing to teach is self-awareness, but that is so important. And I'm grateful that you guys are doing that because I do think it's something kids have to be taught to really give some attention to.
Oh, yeah.
This is an interesting question, and I guess this does go with boundaries. How can you be a parent and as your kids get older, be their friend?
Ooh, so now we're not talking about the bubble
Physical.
anymore. We're talking about a much
Yes.
broader set of boundaries. Any of you want to kind of jump in on that one?
Well, I'll jump in. It's a lot easier not to be a friend when
Yes.
your children are, 6 years old.
Right.
So it is, but even boundaries at home might start with the idea of giving your child that space. And even if it's not that they have their own bedroom, maybe they share a bedroom, but still identifying what that space is and kind of where their safe space is. And if it is a shared bedroom, then, where is is it that child's bed, or is it a space in the home that they can kind of go and retreat if they need to, and being respectful of what that space is for that child. Because again, as an adult, we often forget that we kind of have free reign over everything.
Right.
When you're 7 and you don't feel like you have any control over anything, and your house isn't, you don't have a space in your home where you can go,
Right.
that can be difficult. So giving them that space where they can kind of set up their own boundaries and learn what that looks like for respecting other people's spaces too.
I think establishing routines, like having set routines at home,
Yes.
help establish boundaries and also set expectations. But the hardest thing it is, like when we have these expectations and we set these boundaries, that we, as parents, we also need to be able to live by them too. So if
Right.
it's an
Yeah.
expectation that you don't have your cell phone in your room, mom and dad can't have their cell phone in their
Right.
room too.
Right.
So by also leading by example is really probably the best thing that you could do, or to model for your children.
Yeah, echoing that, this, if you're going to expect your child to behave a way at home, and then and to not behave that way at school, that can sometimes throw parents off. Is they may have a more relaxed expectation around how they communicate with their child. Like they might let them use their first name when they're talking to them, or something like that, or they might let them stay up late with them, or be a part of other adult activities. And so then when they go to school and they're sort of conditioned to that kind of comfort level with adults, when they have those interactions with adults, that might not be their comfort level. So then we have some differing boundaries right here. So
Right.
that consistency in boundaries and sort of kind of being the example there is what you want them to be able to do at school is what you want them to be able to do at home too. To kind of circle back to your question, is you can absolutely fulfill the role. I think we all want to be our child's friend. We all want them to, I think when we say that, what we really mean is we want to feel like our child will come to us
Right.
and talk to us and share their
Right.
life with us.
Right.
Well, you can get that and still be a parent that sets boundaries, expectations, that sets standards and has rules in the house and procedures. But when we're talking about sort of the difficulty of being a friend is a lot of times we think about being a friend means that there is no expectation with that, is that
Right.
whatever you say and whatever we do, I'm not going to hold you accountable, right? And that's even kind of a faulty thought of what a real friend is anyway.
Right, for sure.
And so being a parent is absolutely important. You can still be that person that your child comes to, and they'll still have those conversations, and you'll find that when you set those boundaries, they'll come to you more.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting.
For
Yeah,
sure.
that's so true.
And there will be a time in life when that relationship does shift into more of a role where it could look like friendship and it would be more appropriate. But as their children living under your home and learning, that's
Right.
a time for parenting.
There's so many things, comments and questions I could throw out right now, and I think
Boom.
I don't know because
We don't have to stick to a
well,
script. Yeah.
yeah. Well, So rolling things around in my head, so we might have to edit that out. But
And for the people at home, just so that you know, we have a really interesting sort of viewpoint of this from parents. Please know that your counselors are all parents.
Yes.
I
I know,
The,
that
the
does
joy
matter.
of the joy of our department is we all three have children at different stages, right? So Haley has littles, I have mids, and Jenny has teenagers to young adults. And so we have a wide variety, and we're all each in our own different stages with our kids.
Yep.
And so we're going through those very same things.
right,
Well,
and I
and
love that. I'm sorry. Go
Because
ahead.
you look at it, Avery, too. You've got a 6-year-old, or is it Esther 7?
She's
6?
6.
All the way up to a
Almost 27.
son who's
Yeah.
and
So
who's
you
like
have a span.
late 20s. So
Right.
you're seeing the whole spread of
right.
what a lifespan can look like from parenting to friendship. Because I'm sure that there is more of that friendship that you're seeing with your
Right,
oldest.
with your older kids, definitely. You know, and I've had so many people say when you survive the teenage years that they come back to you in the late teens and the 20s, like you make it through, and this beautiful relationship is there in the late teens and early 20s.
Yeah, and I guess like Andy Stanley wrote a book, and it's kind of it's called Getting It Right, but it's about parenting, and it talks about what's your end goal. What is your end goal to have your kids coming back, and how do you parent with the end goal
Right.
in
That's
mind?
beautifully said.
Oh,
I know.
It's really good.
And we all sit here end goal in mind, and all the tools, and yet all of us are a work in progress in
Every day.
parenting.
Every day.
You know, we were just talking beforehand how we're having to take our own advice so very often
Yes.
with our own children.
Yes. Yes.
So parenting is not for the faint of heart.
No.
No,
to
it's
say
an
the
adventure
least.
every day.
It is an adventure. Yes. Speaking of adventure, talk about this is not on our script, but the importance of owning your own mistakes as a parent and apologizing to your children when necessary. I'm just
Yes.
curious your thoughts on that.
Ooh, that's tough.
It's necessary.
Oh, that's a good one.
But it is. I mean, it's humbling.
It's humbling.
Because it's saying like, oh God, I'm right there with you. Like you're learning and I'm learning. But what a teachable moment.
Yeah, I know.
You have to be willing to model because it's an opportunity for them to see. And we talk about this with parents all the time, but it's super hard. It's so easy to say, so hard to do is to sort of put your humanity in front of your child, especially when they're in their teen years.
Right.
I think about, especially with my oldest, who's 14 now, how often now I'm having to turn around and have a conversation with him, sort of putting out like, Dad didn't do this well.
Right.
And you need to know why this wasn't the best execution, and this is how we can both learn from it. And I hope that you'll work to do better than I did. And I think that that is so important that they see you in those moments of humanity, because what happens when they become an adult and they mess up? Then they're going to think that it's just supposed to go perfectly, and it doesn't. And then that's when you run into a lot of problems.
No, it teaches like sincere apology and forgiveness, right? And I think it's an important thing, and see that you're not perfect, right?
Right.
Parents are not perfect at
Far
all.
from it, right.
And be able to apologize and say, hey, I got this wrong. And be able to learn from your mistakes and move
Right.
forward, and be able to have those conversations with your children and say, you know, I'm sorry. I really messed up. If I could go back and fix it, this is what I would do.
Yeah.
And let's move forward. And
love
it's
that.
been like an eye-opening thing for me in my household is asking for forgiveness
Right.
is a big thing.
I love that. Okay, so getting back on topic, talking about the overall theme of personal growth. How do we develop our children into confident human beings, not arrogant or cocky, but develop that appropriate self-confidence?
Well, I think you start with what we just talked about, with that humility piece, is learning early that failure, and we just had Coach Bob McKillop here talking about this, and I love that he continued to talk about this, that learning that failure is not only not a problem, but it's good.
Right.
It's something that we can learn from.
Right.
And when you learn that a mistake or a failure is not the end, that gives you permission to feel free. And when you feel free, you do feel good. You feel confident to know that, yeah, I messed up, but I can come back and do better the next time, or I can improve the third time over, however many times that the world didn't end. When you find that you're okay after those moments, it's just really freeing, and that builds confidence.
Right. I love that.
I think Taylor Swift says it really well. You gotta just shake it off sometimes.
Oh my goodness! I should have known that was coming.
But I had a child in my classroom yesterday, and she was visibly sad. And I was asking her about it, and it was because a classmate had said something to her about the headband she was wearing.
Yeah.
And I'd already complimented her on her cute headband. And so when she told me what it was, and I was like, you know what, girl, you do you, and you do what Taylor Swift says, and you shake it off.
Right.
And she laughed at me. But it is. It's just kind of, reminding them, like, you do you. And, if it makes you feel good, like, you own it, and you're not, it's easier said than done.
Right. I know.
Like, we're not going to worry about what the other people around us
Right.
are thinking. And,
Right.
If you can instill that, and the child was 6.
Right.
So if we can start having those conversations with children when they're that young,
Right.
then they're holding on to some piece of that. And it's going to be repetition. It's going to be sounding like a broken record sometimes. But, reminding them that, like, sometimes you just got to shake it off.
Oh yeah. I'm gonna give you the hot take here too, and this is gonna be
it.
a little controversial. We as parents, we are just so convinced that we have to set our child up for success, for them to be confident, that we are going to put them in the best position at every turn. I'm going to say this: making sure that your kid is on the best little league baseball team, soccer team, football team, making sure they're on the team with all the good kids that are going to guarantee to win, and they're going to get that great little trophy at the end. That is not building confidence in your child. giving your child an opportunity to experience a little bit less curated life where they get to try things. And try things means that there might be failures, there might be successes. One of the best things that happened for my youngest son was he played Pee Wee football and was on one of the worst teams ever, and we lost nearly every game. And so every game was a life lesson about what was really important about today. Did you have fun? Did you try something? Did you meet new people? Did you learn a little bit more about how to play the game? And he had one of the best times that he had ever had. And super short story, every team goes into the playoffs.
Right.
And their team had such a good time that by the time they got to the playoffs, they figured it out and they beat everybody in the playoffs
How
and won
about
the whole
that?
thing. And they had lost every game. And so point one is that Pee Wee sports just don't matter in the grand scheme of things. Point two is let your kids try things. Don't curate everything to be just this path that you think is going to build confidence. Let them build that on their own through adversity and grit and trying stuff and experimenting. Let them get out there and try some stuff.
Wow.
Yeah. And in regards to confidence, we're really good at saying, oh, good job on getting 100 or good job on getting an A, instead of like, good job on all that hard work that you put through.
Right.
And
Right.
good job on persevering. Or you're such a hard worker. We
Right.
need to praise that aspect
Yes.
instead of just, hey, good job, you got an A.
Right.
So there's so
Not
much
always the end
more to
result.
it than just
A number.
a number.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that.
So-
I love that. That is very good sound advice. And I love the concept of curating a very successful path for your child, because I think we're all guilty of
We're all
that to a
trying.
degree,
We're all doing it.
because we love them. We want to protect them. We want to keep
What's
them
us?
from adversity as much as possible,
Yeah.
when that is the very thing that they need to really grow.
And it sounds like it's more like what's the experience rather than what's the outcome.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I think
Exactly.
you're right. So we talked a little bit about setbacks and adversity, but this one is a more serious take on that. If your child really is exhibiting symptoms of anxiety and depression, and that adversity has maybe taken them to a place you didn't anticipate, what tools do we have as parents? What do we need to be looking for? What do we do?
I think your biggest tool is your main tool is your presence. And that doesn't mean hovering over your child constantly, but it means being actively communicating with your child, being aware of what their life is. If they're in middle school, who are their friends? What are they doing? What kind of activities are they involved in? How is school going? You don't have to be there sitting next to them. You don't have to scan through every text, but having real conversations with them regularly, and that being an expectation for just how things go. That's your first line of defense is being that presence in your child's life. That's gonna actually help a great majority of the issues there. That's the first thing.
And I think too, it's the being present, but you know your child. So if you can see that your child's withdrawing, or you can see that there's just an attitude shift, that can lend way to a place for a conversation with the presence piece. And it doesn't mean there's going to be, a all out, just come to Jesus at that moment. But being in tune and trying to get those conversations started.
And a conversation means face to face, eyes to eyes, ears to
Yes.
ears. Put the screens down. That's for
Yes.
us and the
Yes,
kids.
exactly.
Sometimes we're in our screens
I know.
and we're like, "How's your day?" And they were like,
Right.
and then
Right.
we just kind of move through it because we're busy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And really listening to what they have to say, and not be so,
That's right.
hey, it's okay.
Right.
It's going to be okay. Everything's
True.
fine. Everything will work out. You don't
True.
don't worry about it. Don't tell them that, because
Right.
they are worried, right?
Right,
They are
right.
stressed. They're worried. So look for opportunities just to sit and listen, or go to the room in the evening when they're hiding out in their room on their phones or on their computers, and just say, hey, how's your day today?
Right. Right.
Tell me some things that happened today, and start those conversations. Look for those conversations. And so if you're noticing that your teen is hiding, you go find them.
Yeah. I love that.
And don't, if you get to that point where you've been present, you've had the conversations, you've listened well, and you're like, oh, we're in a spot. My kid might really be battling depression. My kid might really have an anxiety issue. Leverage your resources. We're really fortunate here at the school to have 3 counselors on staff. We have school nurse. Every kid has, in middle school and upper school, has advisors. Every kid has intentional one-on-one teachers in the lower school. Leverage those people that are seeing your child when you're not seeing them,
Right. Yeah.
and involve them. We have to remove the stigma around mental health conversations.
Yes, we
that
do.
just because we've identified that a child might be experiencing that doesn't mean that there's something wrong or broken in that child. It just means that this might be something that we can work through, and that this
Right.
might be a phase, and this might be an issue for the moment. But it's best for us to have those conversations, and don't be afraid to seek outside help. Don't be
Right.
afraid to try out a therapist or a mental health professional. They're just regular people, just like you and me, that are trained to have these conversations with children. And it's just, I think we gotta remove this. Oh, I don't want to talk about this. We don't talk
Right.
about that kind of stuff.
Wow. No, I think we have to. I think
Yeah.
we have to. All right. So going back to conversations, give our parents some examples of questions to ask, because so often you get the "How was your day?" It was good. It's fine. I mean, the one-word answer. So what are some better questions for us as parents to think about asking our kids?
Like, tell me one good thing that happened today. It's like a really a
Yeah.
good quick one to always remember.
Yeah.
Or what was your rose? What was your thorn?
Oh yeah, that's a
Yeah,
good
that
one.
yeah.
was super
yeah,
hard.
I
Yeah.
like that one.
Yeah.
And then that way you're kind of bringing out, like, because also too, you get a child in the car, and if things haven't been going well, sometimes you might default to like, let's question for pain.
Yeah.
Right.
And
right.
you're going down the route of, well, who wasn't nice to you today? Who
Right.
didn't include you today? Who
Right.
didn't you sit with at lunch?
Right.
And maybe giving your child a few minutes in the car too to just kind of sit.
and not answer
decompress.
all your questions.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I don't want that at the end of my day.
Right.
But then giving them some different avenues of, tell me about a highlight of the day. Who was a friend to you today?
Yes.
Who
Yes,
were
that's a good
you
one.
a friend to today?
That's a
And
good one.
then that way you might pick up on a pattern. You might pick up on a friend in the class that needs a friend, and
Yeah.
encourage your child to be that friend.
Right.
Take
That went a little off topic.
Take
No,
time
no, I
switching
agree.
between reporter and biographer. All right. We're always, how was your day today? Fine. What'd you do today?
Yep.
That's the reporter.
Right.
Take a little bit of time to be their biographer. Ask them,
I
hey,
love that.
who are your friends right now? Who would you say if you had to tell me, who are your like top 3 friends? Who are your bros? Who are your girls? Who do you hang out with? Tell me about them. What's so great about them? Why don't you hang out with this person where you used to hang out with that person? Tell me about that. What happened there? And it might just be something like, oh, we just don't really, we don't have any classes together, or we don't really mesh. But switch roles from reporter to biographer, and get in on like who they are as a person a little bit. Tell me about, or mess up one of the great things I love is mess up a name that you've heard before, and say, hey, how was Cheryl doing? You mean Sarah? Yeah, her. Tell me about Sarah. And they love that because they want to correct you, and they want to
yeah,
be
they do.
right, and then you can kind of get in on a conversation. You use your tactics.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
I love that. Okay, so how about self-control? How do we teach this so important skill to our children at all the ages?
Well, it's a conversation going on at my house like all the time.
I don't think it stopped.
I know. I was going to say.
It goes somewhat into boundaries. What we were talking about
Yes.
earlier is it's, that is exhibiting self-control if you're able to stay out of somebody's personal space. But it's kind of, I tell kids a lot of the time, it's just that long that it takes for you to make a choice. So you don't have time necessarily when you're being impulsive to be like, well, what would the consequence be if I did this right now? You're just doing it. And so it's trying to find that second, that pause to stop yourself, to pull yourself back. And that's not just something that's going to happen because you're going to tell your child to do it. That's going to take something that's going to take a lot of intention,
Right.
a lot of practice, a lot of mess ups for them to maybe down the road be like, I had that moment and I decided not to do it
Right.
because I caught myself.
Yeah. That's so good. Whether you're 4 or 40, that is very applicable
Yes.
advice.
Yes.
It doesn't stop.
No, it really doesn't stop. Talking about how do I find balance? Is that you as a parent that is needing to find balance? That question.
I think it's. I think when I wrote that, how do we find balance?
How do
I
we
think
find
that's.
balance?
I think that is for the student, but always for the parent as well.
Yes.
I think when we're talking about how can I find balance, so when we're talking about this idea of like finding self-confidence, having self-control, trying new things, it's like how how do we balance that? Right now, kids are really leaning in on, especially when they get to middle school, they're leaning in on their social situation, right?
Yeah.
And even in elementary school, they're kind of figuring out who they are and like, what is this world about, right?
Right.
And they're learning about appropriate boundaries, appropriate self-control. And so this idea of balance is like, how do I find the good, happy medium of myself, right? Was that reaction way too much, too intense? A good example that I always lean back to, my youngest would always take cues from his older brother when his older brother thought something was funny, and he would laugh very unnaturally, like ha 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 ha, kind of like that. But and we always thought it was the most hilarious thing, but he didn't know. He was trying to figure out like, why was this funny?
Right.
What was
right.
so funny about that? But I need to laugh because my brother's laughing about it, and so that's this idea of this balance of like, are you doing this because this is how you would respond to it, or are you
Right.
doing this because how somebody else expects you to
Yes.
respond? Finding that balance of self-control versus also allowing yourself to get out there and kind of establish who you are.
Right.
That's really important for our students, and whether that's in their personality development, in their school and daily life, finding that balance of just where is a nice sweet spot for them.
Right.
There's so much work on who a person is in elementary school, middle
Right.
school, and
Right.
high school. They're just trying to feel like, what kind of person am I? Am I this
Right.
outgoing person, or am I really moody and broody? Like, what am
Right.
I?
Right.
And they're trying to figure that out. And so finding that balance of being comfortable with yourself and being okay that maybe I'm don't have to be loud and boisterous if I don't really feel comfortable being that way.
Right.
You know,
Right.
I don't have to, join in with that because everybody else is doing it. You know,
Right.
you're allowed to have your opinions.
Right.
You know?
So, as parents, when you're trying to equip your child, how they want to be known with all those, with figuring themselves out.
Sure.
How do you teach that? How do you cultivate that in your child?
I guess providing opportunities and outlets to explore lots of different things.
Yeah.
Because that is what middle school is.
Right. Yes.
Is kind of figuring those things out. You're no longer being kind of put into what your parents
Right.
think is the right activity for you, and there might have been some choice along the way, but you're really the one kind of forging your path at that
Right.
point.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it's just letting them go.
And you're still guiding as a parent. You're not
Right.
hands off.
Right.
But
Right.
you're still trying to instill your home values, and
Right.
you're still trying to instill what you believe is right, and teaching them those different values. But at the same time, just like Haley said, it's giving them the opportunity to say, I'm not a broccoli guy.
Right.
I'm a carrot guy, something along that line, or I really enjoyed this sport at this time, but I really got into this sport later,
Right.
or I thought I was a big time actor in theater, but I really enjoy the technical theater part of it. It's letting them find that place and supporting them through it, because we all have as parents aspirations, right?
Right.
Because they went to that soccer camp when they were 8, and so you already have decided they're going to be a World Cup athlete,
Right.
and
Right,
they may in 3 years decide I don't want nothing to do with soccer anymore.
Right.
I have found my new joy of ice hockey, or
Right.
or of reading club, or whatever it is, and then we're like, oh, but I had such big dreams for the World Cup,
Right. Right.
and we have to be okay with, like Haley
Right.
said, let that go.
Because those might be our dreams, not their dreams.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And then that's when you start having some dissonance.
Yeah.
When you start pushing the way you want them to go, and then the way they want to go, and then you're in for some fun then.
Yeah.
With that triangle, like the health triangle, right? You have your mental health, your physical health, and your mental emotional health. And trying to keep that balanced is key. And as parents, we sometimes want to have that huge triangle, and the kid is trying to balance that triangle and try to keep it equal. But in fairness, it's important to make sure that their kids are able to balance smaller triangles.
Yeah.
And to be aware of like not having too much on their plates. And I
Yes.
think nowadays so many parents and kids think that we have to do this, this, and this in
Right.
order to get into college, and you have to do all these
Oh, it's a
wonderful,
real
huge
thing.
things.
Right.
When you really don't need to have this huge triangle and try to
Right.
balance it, because you're going to be all lopsided. But if you can narrow it down to a smaller triangle and really focus on the things that your children enjoy, or
Right.
and
Right.
focus on that.
Right. That's also good.
These kids are so
good.
busy.
They're so busy. They're juggling so
they
much.
are.
Absolutely.
I'm very busy.
And they do have a lot on their plate, activity-wise, but also pressure. They
Yes.
just
Yeah.
they feel
Yes.
it.
Yes.
And so, which is why I think it's so important to keep talking about mental health, because they are balancing a lot of things that we didn't have to balance. They're balancing all these things, but then they have the added blessing of the phone, which just adds
It's extra.
Yeah.
so
The
much
busiest
more.
generation and the loneliest
Yeah.
generation all at the
Yeah.
same time, every time.
It's so true. Okay, so let's go to friendships and relationships. How do you navigate friendships? You know, when they're 3, 4, 5, and 6, those are the easy years of friendships. But as friendships begin to change as they get older, how do you help them navigate when those relationships that they were super close with, or those friends that they were
Start
super
changing.
close with, start changing?
Yeah, it is hard because a lot, especially in a community like this, where you have a
Mm-hmm.
lot of children who are growing up with grandchildren of their grandparents,
Right.
you know, friends. So it's like generational friendships, and there's such beauty in that, and it's such a what makes this community so unique.
Right.
But then it's also that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to jive.
Right,
And
right.
and as parents, that can be hard because it's
Right.
like, gosh, I was so close with their mom growing up, and now I want them
Right.
to be friends, and
Right.
and it might be that they are,
Right.
but it might be that they're not, and it's kind of being okay with that. Not being how it plays out, and you know, and I think reminding children even when they are 5, 6, and 7, when largely a lot of what's happening is just kind of, you know, parent organized get-togethers,
Right.
that it is, you know, who makes you feel good, who brings out the best in you,
Yes.
who sparks this little light in you,
Yes.
that makes you feel good, because you don't want to start that doubt so young.
Right.
If you've got to, they know what feels good and what doesn't.
Right. Right.
And so I think that that's important for them to learn to listen to that. And if there are friends around them that are not bringing that out, then it doesn't mean you'll never be friends with them. It just means like right now, let's kind of figure out what we need to figure out and let them figure
Right.
out what they need to figure out. And,
Right.
we can come back around.
Right.
But it does change as they get older. And they are going to start picking those friends regardless of,
Right.
you know,
Right.
what parents
Right.
want.
And how do you teach kids at the younger age before we get to middle school? How do you teach kids that the kids who may not bring out that spark, who may seemingly bring them down,
I know.
but yet they're still drawn to them? So how do you teach them to not let people's words affect them at such a young age and still love that person, but put up some kind of little boundary
Boundaries.
to
Yeah.
just still maintain a friendship, but not take things so to heart?
And it's a really good question, and it's one that it's hard because it, no matter what their feelings that are involved, and their feelings get hurt, and you know, that as a counselor, like, you know, it hurts me to see these kids coming in and feeling like somebody's not being a good friend to them, and it might be asking them, because I had one little girl come in, and she's having, you know, was having some friendship difficulty, and I asked her, you know, do you have, who are some people that make you feel good? And she said, I've got 2. And I kind of said, you know, that's all you need.
It's a gift.
You
Yeah.
know,
That's all you
but
need.
then it's hard to think about it like, okay, you've got 2 great friends, and
Right,
that's
right.
awesome.
Right.
But then you see a birthday party of 12 or 15 or
Right.
20 kids,
Right.
and you know, then you kind of feel like, well, no, I need to be friends with all these people, or I need to be included in all of these things. And that's, I think, where some of it starts getting difficult, is that you're looking at a bigger picture, but you don't have the, I guess, the experience of an adult to see that the world doesn't need to look like a 40-person birthday party.
Right. Right.
You know, that
Right.
if you've got your few friends, then you've got really what you need.
Right. Right.
And but it's hard to understand that as a child.
It is.
It is.
It
A
is.
dollar bill is better than 100 pennies sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. There you go.
Oh, I love that.
My husband loves
Yeah.
that one.
For sure.
Friends by association are not friends.
Yeah. I know. Oh, so speak especially to the parents of girls that as they grow up and they're approaching middle school, there is a tendency for parents to, well, you can see groups beginning to form where the group used to be larger, the circle used to be wider, that it gets much smaller and feelings get hurt. How do you equip your girls going into middle school to keep the circle not so close, so tight all the time. Even if you do just have one or two friends, but how, it's even something you can see visually sometimes where
Yes.
girls stand in circles and, but to turn outward to those who need a friend.
Yeah. So I think students or children need to understand, what does it mean to be a friend, and realize, like, what are some qualities that I want to see in a friend,
Right.
and do I see those qualities in me? So starting inwards and versus looking outwards about looking for friends does wonders. So what kind of things am I being a good friend, or am I gossiping?
Right.
Am I being a good friend by supporting this person? Or so really a lot of self-reflection again,
Right,
and
yes.
learning how to be that friend and looking
Yes.
for qualities in you.
Yes.
And then if you could find those qualities, you'll be able to find some qualities in other people that like, what you're looking for, and go outside that circle, because there's a lot of people out there that you
Right.
could be friends with,
Right.
besides the same people
Right.
over and over and over again.
Right.
And I think something else I see is some loneliness.
Yeah.
And it's from some of these kids who are a friend to everybody, but they might not feel like they fit into X group, Y group, or Z group.
Right. Right.
But everybody likes them.
Right.
But they're not feeling like they've got their core group of people, and helping them recognize too that you don't necessarily need that group. It does feel good. Like I
Right.
want to be part of a group too.
Right.
I
Right.
do.
Right.
But knowing that, they're well liked, and I guess helping them understand that that's so beautiful, and
Right.
that's something that not everybody possesses.
Right.
Character.
Right,
It is
right.
a great way to be, is to kind of be a friend to all. But when you can be that way, it can also feel lonely, because you're kind of wondering, like, who are my people?
Yeah. Yeah.
I've been there.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
And again, these are things that we're talking about children here, but can easily apply to us as adults, especially adults who have moved around a lot. There's a beauty in learning how to make a friend and be a friend, and that is something that we all have to work on.
Agree.
Okay, so speak to this as again, I've raised boys. A girl is different, all right? A girl is different, even at this age, and their friendships are different. When, as a parent, do you intervene in your children's friendships and navigating those? And when do you just step back and let them handle it?
As a mom of a girl, a girl and a boy, you don't step in.
Yeah.
This is a time that they need to learn. You support,
Right.
but you don't talk ill about the other person either, because
Oh,
that's not
very
going to
good
get
advice.
anywhere.
Very good.
Yes.
So by listening and supporting, and then allow that confidence to be able to let your child have to be able to help out that friendship, but don't get in the middle of it,
Don't get in
because
the middle of it.
it's going to get worse.
Your
Yeah.
kid has to know. Your kid has to know that you, as their parent, are going to model a better behavior, that you're not going to turn on that kid. That kid may have wronged your baby,
Right.
and you just
Right.
want to protect your baby, right?
Right.
And so that's a normal reaction to want to do that, but
Right.
you have to teach them to be better than that, and
Right.
you have to teach them that the thing that they're experiencing is not the thing that we're going to reciprocate with.
Right.
And
Right.
that's super important. And that's boys,
Right.
girls, anybody.
Right.
Yeah, because they
Right.
could be friends with the person 2 days later.
Yeah.
Right.
And then here
Right.
you are as a parent, like, and
Right.
then maybe your child won't want to go back to you and talk
Right.
to you anymore, because now you're friends. Like, you know what I
Right,
mean? So we have to
right.
be
Yeah.
very careful.
Right.
And how does that look for you to
Yeah.
be at odds with a child
Right,
as an
right,
adult?
right.
As an adult, right? That just
Not
it
good.
just doesn't look well.
Because I was going to say it might be the unpopular thing to hear, but yeah, not intervening unless there is some
Yeah.
harm,
Right.
harm of any
Right.
kind that might be happening.
Right.
And then in that case, then that would be a place to intervene. But mostly the day to day, it's going to be a matter of sitting back and I think that we all are kind of inclined to fix.
Right.
And that
Right.
is what
I know.
people,
It's by
parents
nature.
are often going in to do, is to fix and to be helpful.
Yeah.
But we want to equip our kids to be able to fix and navigate that on their own.
Yes.
Yes.
And sometimes we want to save that relationship. We
Right,
think that
right.
friendship, yeah,
That's
you're
true.
making
Yeah,
the
I
face
know.
right there where
That's
you're
true.
saying,
Yes.
look, but they're so
I
sweet.
know, they're
and,
precious.
And that's where that whole legacy piece is. This is, my neighbor's grandkids' friend, and we grew up together, and they grew up together. And so we
Yeah.
got to make this work. And
Right.
and the reality is what I see in the high school a lot with parents is, a lot of these kids who may have been friends in elementary school or in middle school grow apart.
Right.
They
That's just
figure out
natural.
who they are, and
Right.
and it doesn't mean that either person is a bad person. Hear this,
Right.
parents. It does not mean that either person is a bad person
No.
because they grow apart, and we have to be okay with allowing our kids to explore and meet new people,
Right.
and
Yes.
and continue to define what they feel makes a good friend, not what we feel makes a good friend. So
Right.
we have to be
Right.
careful with that.
And I would say we've done that too as adults, that there are people that have been in your life for a season of time,
Right.
but because we've got decades
Yes.
compared to a decade,
Right.
or a decade and a half, that it's,
Yeah.
we see that and
Right.
we've experienced it, but knowing that it's normal.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we addressed not intervening with the child specifically, but that also would include, or I'm asking, does that include you reaching out to a parent, like a parent of the child? Just like, again, just no.
Unless there's harm.
Unless
Yeah,
there's
is somebody
harm.
being harmed,
Yes.
and that doesn't
Yes.
necessarily mean physically.
Right.
But-
Like you're talking about bullying per se, or if something's
Yeah.
going on at school
If
that
the
somebody
kid's-
needs to know
If the
about.
kid is in distress and reaching out for
There you
help,
go.
Yes.
then that
There's a
might be
difference.
Yes.
different. But you still have to be very careful and look at what's going on, and you have to be very thoughtful about that and how you handle that. It is always best, and what we advise parents to do first is talk to each other first. You know, it is always best to try to work it out together first. If you know the point of the problem, then go to that source and work it out with that parent. Sometimes mediation helps, and sometimes it doesn't. But if I have a problem with Jenny, if our kids have a problem with each other, the first thing that we should do is I should reach out to Jenny and say, hey, this is what's going on. Just want you to be aware of it. You know, we're going to try to advise our child to kind of back off and stay out of it. And if you could help us with that, that'd be great too. And you got to remember too, telling someone what to do, just like you wouldn't want to be told what to
Right,
do,
can be.
right.
never yields a good conversation. You have to go in with subordinate goals where the two of you are trying to help each other to help your kids live in a healthy way. It can't just be like, hey, get your kid out of my kid's face or else. You know, that never goes
Not
well.
productive.
And so just
There's
remember that
always
as well.
Two sides to every story.
Oh, yes.
Right.
And we always
Right.
think ours is right.
Right.
So we
Right.
have to be tread
Absolutely.
carefully.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So, well, you've already kind of alluded to this, but if a parent would need to come to you as counselors, what are situations that you say, we want to know about that?
Someone's being harmed.
Someone's being
That's
harmed.
always
Yes.
important. Someone's being harmed physically is always, you know, without a doubt, something that we want to be aware of. We want to be able to provide resources. We're humans too. There's no guarantee that we can fix anything, and
Right.
usually we
Right.
don't fix things. We just help people, put people in the places to get the resources they need to address issues. But if somebody's being harmed, if that student doesn't have an advocate for themselves, right? Sometimes kids are in different
Yeah.
situations,
Yeah.
and that the issue might be a parent, it might be a relative or something like that. So in an opportunity where a kid can't get a voice for themselves or they don't have an advocate for them, those are places where we do want to
Don't
know
wanna know
about those
about
kinds of things.
I would say any change at home, whether it's
Yeah.
That's a good.
a
thing.
divorce,
Right.
a death of a family member or pet even.
Yeah.
If there is, even a move, like, sometimes I think we underestimate the way kids can feel, but any significant change that's going on in the home is something important to,
Yeah.
Yeah.
reach
Okay.
out.
Absolutely.
Affect them
Agreed.
here at school for sure. Okay, so shifting back to relationships, but romantic relationships
Oh, I've
as
been
they
waiting for
get
this one.
older. Woo! So help us navigate those.
I put that one in there.
You got
Give us your wisdom.
No wisdom. But I feel like that's just something that we have to talk about as well, especially in the upper school. We have lots of relationships, people coming in and out of relationships, different seasons of that. People discovering romantic relationships at different times in the upper school. It's just a really interesting time, especially for parents, right? Because this, you had this child kind of to yourself, and now they've started having a bunch of friends, and now there's someone that's taken a stronger interest in your child, or maybe your child's taken a stronger interest in someone. So, what do you do as a parent? How do you support that? How do you keep your kid doing the right things and making the right decisions? And so some of the advice and kind of things that I want to do is, again, keep those lines of communication open,
Yes.
continue to reinforce your family's values that you have instilled from this point on, hopefully you've been having conversations with your
Right,
child
right.
about what romance looks like, about what
Right.
love is, and about what affection is, and what's appropriate. This goes back to our boundaries conversation, and helping your child understand that even in a romantic partnership, that they still have their same autonomy and their
Right.
same voice.
Yes.
That's really,
Good
really
point.
important,
Yes.
because a lot of these kids, they get so enamored with each other that they see themselves as a collective unit,
Yes.
just as one. And so when that doesn't go well, sometimes those kids lose their voice, and that's
Yeah.
when they get in a little bit of trouble and they don't know kind of what to do. And they start to only identify themselves as valuable within that couple.
Right.
And so
Right.
helping to remind them of their individual value and their individual autonomy is really important also.
So true.
And maybe as a family, invite people over,
Right,
and if they
right.
get to know them
Right,
on a
yes.
different level, and support that, and so they don't have to feel like, "Oh, I have to hide this relationship."
Right,
Make
right.
it make it open.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
That's a
it
good
sounds
point.
like it goes right back
That's
to
a
what
good
we've
point.
covered with, again, the personal space and being able to use that language that you start developing when you're young, so you can use that when you're older, that you are having those productive conversations with your kids. So then when you do need to have more difficult conversations about romantic relationships,
Right.
what I guess being sure that the path has kind of been laid for you. So you're not
Right.
all of a sudden scrambling to make up 10 years worth of work
Yeah.
when your
Yes.
child's going on their first car date.
Oh my
Right,
goodness! Yes,
right.
don't do that. But don't listen. Don't shrink away from the conversations because of your own personal experience with relationships. Sometimes I've talked with parents, and they've felt uncomfortable because they feel like they might be judged by
Right.
their own children because of their relationships or their situation that they're in. Look, we're all human beings. We all go through life in the same ways. Don't let that ever be an excuse to hold you back from having those conversations with your child.
Right.
That you are, even though they will tell you that they don't want to listen to anything that you have to say, I cannot stress enough the importance of being willing to talk to them about relationships and what makes a good relationship, and how those qualities should always exist, right? And that these people should always make you feel good or be striving to, and that it's okay to have disagreements, but it's not okay to be disrespected, and that just because you're in a romantic relationship doesn't change the expectation around treating you well as a person.
Right,
And so
right.
you can't let yourself be afraid to engage in that because you're worried about how someone might see you as well. You got to get in
Right.
there with them.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and understand the verbiage now is
Yes.
very important. It's like, oh, we're
Please
talking.
enlighten
Yeah,
Okay,
talking
what
is
is
not
it?
talking, parents.
Yes,
Yes.
talking is not talking anymore.
Talking is the equivalent of a boyfriend and a girlfriend. You need to know this right now, parents. If they say they're
Yes.
talking, that is one step beyond dating. And no one says dating anymore.
Nope.
They really don't say boyfriend and girlfriend a lot
Nope,
either.
they don't.
So what do they say?
They'll call themselves. They'll say they're talking, or I've heard them refer to themselves as partners now.
Yes.
Or they'll
Talking, we're
or they'll just say
talking.
we're together.
Together.
They
is a
like to
big
say
one.
that.
Interesting.
and
Yeah,
so-
they're together.
Non-committal.
Yeah,
but
I
they're,
know.
Yeah.
but they're very territorial. So
Yeah.
if you're talking to someone,
Dating feels too formal.
Yes.
It feels too formal. And boyfriend, girlfriend
Feels too
feels real
formal.
possessive. And
And
so they
that's-
don't use that as much.
exactly.
Interesting.
So if you can encourage maybe like kids hanging out together,
Right,
instead
right.
of just like one-on-one going out on a date, which kids really
Right.
they don't call it dates per
Yeah.
se
Yeah.
anymore. But get a group of kids hanging out together. That is probably like one of the best things that you could do instead of. And kids are not socializing like they used to
No,
either
I know,
anymore.
I know.
So it's a lot of it is just
Right.
they're dating online.
Online.
Yeah.
And so get out, go see them socially,
Right,
go hang out
right.
with friends, get out of the house.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Go do something as a couple or go do something as a group.
Right.
Yeah.
Even
right.
better.
Right.
Encourage them
Yeah,
to
that's the
meet
fun
other
stuff.
people. Sometimes, we see it oftentimes. We'll see these couples form in their long-term relationships in high school, and there's nothing wrong with it. There's a lot of people that meet their forever sweetheart in high school, and that's okay. That's just
Yeah,
great.
me too.
But we don't want them to feel like that they're locked into something just because they're with that one person.
Exactly.
Right,
You
right.
don't want a person to ever feel like that they have to be in that relationship because of time. That's why I was saying like friends by association are not friends.
Yes.
Because sometimes we feel like we have to be a friend to somebody just because we've
Right.
known them our whole life, or we
Right.
have to be in a relationship with this person just because we always have been.
Right,
And we have
right.
to be open open to the idea of letting that person continue to grow and develop. And so that's a great conversation to have with your child as well. Don't be afraid if they're in a long-term relationship. That's great. But just be open to having that conversation with your child that they have lots of options and that they are free to meet new people as they choose, that they're not the property of anybody, and they're certainly free to experience life.
Wait, so do they go on breaks on the summer still? We're like, we're going to take a break?
We see some of that, but mostly like when they head off to college, then they agree to have an amicable break.
I was just wondering.
Yeah.
I remember growing up and it was like, we're on a break for the summer. I was like, okay.
Long
That makes
distance
sense.
rarely works. That's still true. And listen, you as a parent also don't get too overly attached to boyfriend or girlfriend because they may be gone tomorrow, and you lamenting them in front of your child after that breakup is not a good idea either, because that child may be going through some emotional stuff about it. And then you're talking about how you're disappointed because you really like Joey or Bobby or whoever it was. That doesn't help them either.
Right.
And I think the last one, it is okay to say no, and it's okay to end a relationship.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So
There
those
you
two
go.
things are also, like, if your child is getting to that age to dating, to understand you're allowed to say no.
Yeah.
And that you know how to get out of a relationship that you're not comfortable with.
Yes.
So I think those are two things that are really important to.
Right.
Kind of back to
To know.
boundaries.
Right.
Please-
Right.
again.
Goes back to boundaries.
Please know that we
Exactly.
talk to all of our kids at Brookstone about social boundaries and relationships and dating, and especially like dating violence and what consent means. We talk about that. We talk about what is appropriate behavior. And we do that at all three levels. Now, it's all very age appropriate, but we really want to make sure that our students understand their personal space and their rights to their own bodies and their right to be respected as either friends or in romantic relationships. And that is something that we touch on at all three levels. And that's really important. So parents, we're having that conversation with students about how to be respected, and that no means no, and what is consent. And we're talking about our personal boundaries and our bodies and how we take care of ourselves and what an appropriate relationship looks like and what an inappropriate one looks like. And so we want to partner with y'all on that. We want to be able to work with our parents on that, but just know that that is something that's really important to us as well.
Right. Right. Well, and that's one reason as a parent I'm so grateful for the work that you guys do, because I do think we need people to come alongside us as parents to pour into our children. And, I'm sitting here thinking of all the conversations I need to go home and have with my children, and I'm just grateful that you guys for the work you do and what y'all just spend countless hours doing here at
Thank
school
you.
with our students, because it matters. And I'm very grateful. So I wish we're going to have to do this again, because I have more things to ask about, but I know we've run out of time. So I just appreciate y'all taking the time to do this morning.
Thank you.
And again, for all your collective wisdom, and from the tiniest to the oldest and beyond, I just appreciate it. And it's so important. So thank you for the tools you're giving us as parents. So,
Thank you.
all right, you'll have to come back.
Will do.
Yay.